Daniel Harper never imagined that a simple driving job would quietly change the direction of his life. It began on a cold gray morning in Seattle, the kind of morning where the sky looked heavy and the streets were still wet from overnight rain. Daniel sat inside a small coffee shop near a busy intersection, staring at his phone and refreshing his email for the 10th time that hour. At 32 years old, he had always believed life would be stable. For years he had worked at a logistics company, handling schedules and shipments, living a normal routine like most people. But 6 months earlier the company suddenly downsized, and Daniel lost his job along with many others. At first he thought finding another position would be easy, but weeks turned into months, and rejection emails slowly replaced hope. Rent was overdue, savings were disappearing, and every morning felt heavier than the last. That day, as he finished his coffee and prepared to leave, his phone finally rang. It was a transportation service company he had applied to a few days earlier. They were looking for reliable drivers to work as personal chauffeurs for private clients. The pay was not extraordinary, but it was steady, and right now steady was exactly what Daniel needed. He accepted the offer without hesitation, telling himself that driving people around the city was better than sitting at home worrying about bills. 2 days later he started his new job. The company manager explained that his first assignment would be simple. A client named Olivia Carter needed a personal driver temporarily because she had injured her leg in a skiing accident. She owned a successful architecture firm and had a busy schedule of meetings across the city. Until she recovered, Daniel would drive her wherever she needed to go. Daniel arrived early on his first morning, parking a clean black sedan outside a beautiful house in a quiet Seattle neighborhood. Tall trees surrounded the property, and the house itself looked modern and elegant, with wide glass windows and a long stone pathway leading to the front door. Everything about the place suggested success, yet the silence around it felt strangely lonely. Daniel checked the time and waited patiently in the driver's seat. A few minutes later the front door opened, and Olivia Carter slowly stepped outside. She moved carefully, using a crutch to support her injured leg, but even with the injury she carried herself with natural confidence. She looked to be in her early 30s, dressed professionally despite the casual morning, her hair tied back neatly as if she had already been preparing for the day for hours. When she reached the car, Daniel stepped out quickly and opened the door for her. "Good morning," he said politely. Olivia gave a small nod and smiled faintly. "You must be Daniel." Her voice sounded calm but distant, like someone used to handling everything alone. Daniel helped her settle into the seat and then returned to the driver's side. As he started the engine, she gave him the office address. The drive began quietly. Traffic was light, and the city slowly came alive around them as stores opened and commuters filled the streets. For the first few minutes neither of them spoke. Daniel focused on driving smoothly, remembering the company's advice about professionalism. Eventually Olivia broke the silence by asking how long he had been working as a driver. Daniel admitted honestly that it was his first week. Instead of sounding worried, she seemed amused. "Well, I guess we're both adjusting to new situations," she said, lightly tapping her crutch. That simple comment broke the tension. During the rest of the drive they spoke casually about the city, about the unpredictable Seattle weather, and about how frustrating injuries could be for people who liked staying busy. When they reached her office building downtown, Daniel stepped out to open the door again. Olivia paused before walking toward the entrance and looked at him for a moment. "You're very calm," she said. "That's good. My days are usually chaotic." Daniel smiled politely and told her he would be waiting whenever she finished. For the next few hours he remained parked outside the building, watching people rush through the busy streets while sipping coffee from a nearby cafe. It felt strange returning to a routine again after months of uncertainty. When Olivia finally returned later that afternoon, she looked tired but relieved to be leaving work. The drive back to her house was smoother, and the conversation came more naturally this time. She spoke about architecture projects, about how buildings were not just structures but stories about the people who lived and worked inside them. Daniel listened carefully. Even though he didn't know much about architecture, he admired the passion in her voice. Over the next few days this routine continued. Every morning Daniel arrived at the same time, and every morning Olivia stepped out of the quiet house with determination, refusing to let her injury slow her career. Their conversation slowly grew longer. She asked Daniel about his past work and how he ended up driving for the company. He told her honestly about losing his job and trying to rebuild his life step by step. Instead of judging him, Olivia respected his honesty. In return, Daniel learned that Olivia had built her architecture firm almost entirely on her own. She had started with small projects years earlier and slowly worked her way up until her company became well known in the city. But behind the success, Daniel began noticing small signs of loneliness. Some evenings when he drove her home after long meetings, she stayed quiet the entire ride, staring out the window as if thinking about something far away. One evening rain started falling heavily while they were driving through downtown traffic. When they reached her house, Olivia didn't open the door right away. She remained seated, watching the rain slide down the windshield in long quiet lines. After a moment she spoke softly. "Daniel, do you ever feel like life changes direction without warning?" Daniel thought about the months he had spent searching for work, about the uncertainty that followed losing his job. "Yes," he answered honestly. Olivia nodded slowly but didn't explain further. Instead she stepped out of the car and thanked him for the ride before going inside the quiet house. Daniel drove away that night thinking about her question. What had caused someone as successful as Olivia Carter to sound so uncertain? The job had only been supposed to be about driving from place to place, but Daniel had already started sensing that Olivia carried stories she rarely shared with anyone. He didn't realize yet how deeply their lives would soon connect, or how a simple driving job would lead him into moments that would challenge both of them in unexpected ways. But one thing was already clear. This was not going to be an ordinary job, and the road ahead would change much more than Daniel Harper's career. Daniel Harper quickly became a steady part of Olivia Carter's daily life, though neither of them expected that to happen so naturally. Each morning he arrived before the sun fully rose over Seattle, parking the black sedan outside Olivia's quiet house at the end of the tree-lined street. The neighborhood always felt peaceful at that hour, with only the sound of distant traffic and birds waking in the tall branches above. After a few minutes the front door would open and Olivia would step outside, moving carefully on her healing leg but never allowing the injury to slow her spirit. At first their routine was simple. Daniel would help her into the car, ask where she needed to go, and drive through the city's busy streets while soft music played in the background. But over time the quiet space inside the car slowly turned into a place where both of them felt comfortable speaking about life. Olivia discovered that Daniel had a calm and thoughtful way of listening. He never interrupted and never tried to impress anyone with big words. He simply paid attention. That small quality made him different from most people she worked with every day. In her world, conversations were usually fast and filled with business pressure, but with Daniel the pace felt slower and more human. One morning while they were driving across a long bridge that stretched over the water, Olivia asked him why he had originally studied business before working in logistics. Daniel explained that he had once hoped to start his own company someday, but family responsibilities had forced him to choose a stable job instead. His father had become ill years earlier, and Daniel had stepped in to help support his younger sister while she finished college. Olivia listened carefully, clearly impressed by his sense of responsibility. She admitted that she had also built her career through long years of sacrifice, often choosing work over personal happiness. Their conversations began shifting from simple small talk into deeper topics about ambition, disappointment, and the strange ways life could change direction. One evening after a particularly long day of meetings, Olivia surprised Daniel by asking him to drive somewhere different instead of going home. She directed him toward the waterfront area of the city where the ocean stretched wide under the fading sunlight. The sky was painted with soft orange and purple colors as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the water. Daniel parked near a quiet pier, unsure why they had stopped there, but Olivia stepped out of the car and carefully walked toward the railing overlooking the water. Daniel stayed nearby but gave her space. For several moments she simply watched the waves move gently against the docks, as if gathering courage to speak. Finally she broke the silence. She told Daniel that 3 years earlier she had been engaged to a man named Michael. At that time her architecture company was still growing, and she spent most of her days traveling between construction sites and meetings. Michael had supported her dreams at first, but as the company grew larger the pressure also grew heavier. Long hours, late nights, and constant responsibility slowly created distance between them. 6 months before their wedding, Michael ended the relationship. He told Olivia he felt like he was living in the shadow of her career and didn't believe their life together would ever feel balanced. Olivia said the breakup had shocked her, not because she believed the relationship was perfect but because she had thought love could survive hard work and ambition. Instead she found herself standing alone in the middle of a life she had worked so hard to build. Rather than allowing the heartbreak to stop her, she poured even more energy into her company. She expanded the firm, hired more architects, and took on larger projects across the city. From the outside it looked like success, but deep inside there were moments when the silence of her large house reminded her that success did not always fill the empty spaces left behind by lost relationships. Daniel listened quietly as she spoke, understanding that sharing this story was not easy for her. When she finished, he simply said that continuing forward after heartbreak required a kind of strength many people never developed. Olivia looked at him with quiet appreciation, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. On the drive back home that night something between them had changed. The silence in the car no longer felt awkward, instead it felt calm and comfortable, like two people who understood each other without needing constant conversation. Over the following weeks Olivia began trusting Daniel with small parts of her world. She occasionally asked his opinion about everyday choices, such as which restaurant would be good for an upcoming business dinner or whether a certain neighborhood seemed right for a new project location. Daniel always answered honestly, never pretending to know more than he did. Strangely, that honesty made his thoughts valuable. Olivia appreciated having someone nearby who wasn't trying to impress her or gain something from her success. Daniel simply treated her like a normal person rather than a powerful business owner. One afternoon, however, something happened that shifted the peaceful rhythm of their routine. Olivia received a phone call while they were driving between meetings. Daniel noticed her expression tighten as she listened. Her eyes grew serious, and the confident energy she usually carried suddenly faded. She ended the call quickly and placed the phone on the seat beside her. For the rest of the drive she remained silent, staring out the window at the passing streets as if trying to process difficult news. Daniel considered asking if everything was okay, but he waited until they reached the office building. As he stopped the car, he gently asked if there was anything she needed. Olivia forced a small smile and said it was nothing important, just a complicated business situation. But Daniel could sense that she was hiding her real worries. The confident architect who normally handled every challenge without hesitation now looked uncertain. That evening when Daniel drove her home, the silence returned again, but this time it carried tension rather than comfort. Olivia thanked him as usual before going inside the house, Yet Daniel could tell something serious was happening behind the scenes of her successful life. The next morning when she stepped into the car, her face looked tired, like someone who had spent the night thinking through difficult decisions. Daniel realized that whatever problem had started with that phone call had not disappeared overnight. As they began driving toward the office again, Olivia took a slow breath and finally spoke. She said she might need more than a driver in the coming days. Daniel didn't fully understand what she meant yet, but he nodded without hesitation. At that moment neither of them knew how important that decision would soon become, or how Daniel Harper would step far beyond the simple role he had been hired to play. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Olivia Carter's house feeling a mixture of anticipation and quiet nervousness, unsure exactly what the day would bring, but sensing it would be different from any other he had experienced since starting the driving job. Olivia was already waiting outside, leaning lightly on her crutch, her expression showing fatigue that went beyond the pain from her leg. It was the kind of weariness that came from months of responsibility, pressure, and recent unexpected setbacks. She greeted him with a faint smile but immediately got to the point. "Daniel," she said, "I might need your help today, not just as a driver." Daniel, surprised but willing, nodded immediately, asking quietly, "Of course. Whatever you need." She explained that the investor who had been supporting her firm's largest project had suddenly reconsidered his involvement, threatening to pull funding for a new architectural development that could define her company's future. The project was ambitious, a modern multi-use building in the heart of the city, one that would attract more clients and secure her firm's reputation for years, but now everything hinged on convincing a cautious investor to stay committed. Olivia admitted she felt unsure about how to approach him, worried her words alone might not be enough to restore confidence. Daniel listened carefully as she outlined the situation during the drive to her office, taking note of the details she provided and trying to understand her priorities. Though he was not trained in finance or architectural negotiations, he understood people and could see the fear, doubt, and tension that weighed heavily on her, sensing that this was the moment when she needed support more than ever. After dropping her off at the office, he waited in the car outside, glancing occasionally at the busy city streets and wondering what role he could play beyond driving her from place to place. Hours passed, and when Olivia finally returned, her steps were slower, her posture tense, and her expression revealing frustration mixed with exhaustion. She admitted the meeting had not gone well, as the investors had raised multiple questions about risk, timelines, and the feasibility of the design. Daniel, realizing that words of encouragement might be the only thing she needed right now, gently reminded her of the vision that had fueled her company from the beginning, the drive, passion, and tireless dedication she had poured into her work. He told her that he had observed her focus, determination, and how she carried herself through challenges, and that anyone capable of such commitment deserved to be trusted. Olivia listened quietly, her usual analytical mind absorbing his simple but sincere words. She realized that his perspective, coming from someone who knew her well but was not part of the business hierarchy, had a rare authenticity. For the first time since the meeting, she felt a small flicker of clarity amidst the stress. That night, Daniel drove her home again, and Olivia's mind seemed restless, contemplating what he had said. She realized she could use his calm, honest presence in situations that went beyond driving. The next morning, Olivia surprised Daniel by giving him a folder and saying, "I want you to sit in on the next meeting." Daniel's heart raced. He had expected to remain in the car, silently waiting while Olivia conducted her business, but now she was inviting him to step directly into a world he had never entered before. He opened the folder and found detailed documents about the project, financial plans, and notes she had prepared for her investor presentation. The gravity of the responsibility struck him, but so did a sense of trust that warmed him in an unfamiliar way. Olivia explained that she valued his honesty and perspective and that his observations could help provide insight into the decisions the investors needed to see. Daniel felt both honored and anxious. He was stepping far beyond the role of a driver, into a space that required presence, intuition, and courage. Over the next hours, Daniel prepared quietly in the car, reviewing the documents, asking questions when necessary, and learning as much as he could about the project so he could support Olivia effectively. He realized that her invitation was more than professional, it was personal. She trusted him in a way that most people never had, and that realization strengthened his determination to rise to the occasion. When they arrived at the meeting, Daniel noticed how focused Olivia was, how she carried herself with quiet authority despite the tension that had surrounded her in recent days. He felt a surge of confidence, knowing he could be more than a bystander. Olivia gave him a small nod before entering the conference room, signaling that she believed in him as much as he believed in her. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped in behind her, aware that this was a pivotal moment for both their lives, the point where his support could tip the balance and where his role as her driver had quietly transformed into that of a trusted companion, someone who might help her navigate the most critical challenges of her career and, unknowingly, her heart. That day marked the beginning of a shift neither of them fully anticipated, but both would soon feel its impact, as Daniel Harper started to realize that being a driver was no longer enough. He was now an integral part of Olivia Carter's journey, a presence that would quietly but profoundly shape the decisions, emotions, and outcomes that lay ahead. The day of the big meeting arrived, and Daniel Harper felt a mix of nervous energy and quiet determination as he followed Olivia Carter into the sleek, modern conference room filled with investors who held the future of her company in their hands. Daniel had spent weeks learning details about the project, studying documents, and listening closely to Olivia's explanations, but stepping into the room for the first time made him realize just how high the stakes were. The investors greeted Olivia politely but with an air of critical judgment, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Daniel remained near the side of the room, observing quietly as Olivia began her presentation, explaining the architectural vision, the benefits to the community, and the potential return on investment in calm, precise terms. She spoke clearly and confidently, but Daniel noticed her subtle tension, the small hesitations that revealed the pressure she carried on her shoulders. As questions came from the investors about financial risks, project timelines, and design feasibility, Daniel stayed alert, listening to the conversation with keen attention. At one point, an investor paused and asked him directly, "And you are?" Olivia replied simply, "Someone I trust," and Daniel felt the weight of those words settle on him. He realized that his role had shifted entirely. He was no longer just a driver waiting outside, but a participant whose perspective mattered. Taking a deep breath, Daniel spoke honestly, explaining that while he might not have expertise in architecture or finance, he had observed Olivia's unwavering dedication and meticulous attention to every detail over the past months. He described her commitment, how she consistently went above and beyond, how she listened carefully to her team, and how she approached problems with intelligence and heart. His words were straightforward, without any attempt to impress, yet they carried sincerity that the investors could feel. The room grew quiet as he continued, and Daniel sensed that his honest observations were cutting through the tension, reminding everyone that success was not just measured by spreadsheets, but by the person driving the vision forward. Olivia watched him with quiet gratitude, surprised by how his presence and words shifted the energy in the room. Slowly, the investors began to nod, some exchanging looks of consideration as Daniel's perspective made the human side of the project clear. By the end of the meeting, the investors agreed to continue supporting the project, offering adjustments but maintaining the funding that Olivia had feared might vanish entirely. As they left the building, Olivia exhaled deeply, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time in days. "You helped save the project," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine relief. Daniel, modest as always, shook his head and said, "You did that." But Olivia smiled warmly at him, her eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that went beyond professional gratitude. "You know," she said, "when I hired you, I thought I was getting a driver." Daniel laughed softly, but the laugh carried a new meaning. He understood now that their relationship had grown into something far more significant. Standing together outside, the busy city moving around them like an unstoppable current, they shared a quiet moment of connection that neither of them had anticipated when Daniel first pulled up to her house weeks earlier. In that moment, it was clear that life had a way of pushing people together, placing them in roles they never expected, and teaching them that trust and loyalty often mattered more than titles or positions. Daniel had entered her life simply to drive, but he had become someone she could rely on, someone whose presence made her feel grounded and supported in ways she had long forgotten. Olivia, who had spent years building her company and guarding her heart, realized that life could still offer surprises, people who showed up unexpectedly, whose honesty and steadiness could shift the course of everything. As they walked toward the car, side by side, Daniel understood that this journey was no longer just about work or duty. It was about trust, connection, and the quiet realization that two lives intersecting at the right time could transform everything. The city continued around them, the sound of traffic and distant conversations a reminder of life moving forward, yet in that small space between them, a new chapter had begun. Daniel Harper, who once thought he was just a driver, now held a place in Olivia Carter's life that went beyond any job description. He had become a companion, a supporter, and a presence she could count on, and that realization filled both of them with a quiet, unspoken anticipation for the days ahead. As they drove through the evening streets together, the world outside blurred into motion, but inside the car, there was stillness, a calm assurance that sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and those turns can lead to something deeper, more meaningful, and utterly life-changing. Daniel's journey had started with simple steps behind a steering wheel, yet now it had led him into a role filled with responsibility, trust, and a budding, quiet closeness that neither he nor Olivia had expected but both welcomed. It was a reminder that life often rewards courage, sincerity, and patience, and that even the most ordinary beginnings can lead to extraordinary outcomes. That evening, as the city lights reflected on the windshield and the car moved smoothly through familiar streets, both Daniel and Olivia realized that the road they were on was only beginning, and the connection forged through trust and shared challenges had opened the door to possibilities they had never imagined, a journey that would continue to unfold in ways that neither had anticipated but both were ready to embrace.